Hello everybody and welcome back. My continuation of my book reading of The Body. Chapter 20. The Body. Clouds began to gather in the sky around 2 o'clock, but at first none of us thought it would rain. After all, it hadn't rained since the early days of July. But they kept building up to the south of us in great purple columns, and they began to move slowly in our direction. Finally, we had to accept that it was going to rain. In the hour between 2 and 3, the quality of the day's light began to change. It was just as hot as before, but we knew. The birds knew as well. They seemed to appear from nowhere and fill the sky with their cries. The light grew less defined and our shadows became less clear. The sun had begun to seal in and out of the thickening clouds, and the southern sky turned brown. We watched the enormous thunderclouds come closer and threaten the land. Sometimes lightning flashes within the clouds and changed their purplish color to a light gray. Then we saw lightning flash down from the nearest cloud. It was followed by a long, shaking burst of thunder. We complained a bit about how wet we were going to get, but of course we were looking forward to it. It would be cool, and there would be no leeches in this water. Around 3:30, we saw running water through a break in the trees. "That's it," Chris shouted happily. "That's the Royal." We began to walk faster. The storm was getting close now. The air began to move and the temperature dropped suddenly. I looked down and saw that my shadow had completely disappeared. We were walking in pairs again, 2 on either side of the tracks, so that we can look down both sides of the railway bank. My mouth was dry with nervousness. The sun finally sailed behind the clouds and then reappeared. The light became dull. We could smell the river clearly, or perhaps it was a smell of rain in the air. A sudden impossible flash of lightning lit the area, making me cry out and cover my eyes. I heard the tearing fall of some big tree about 60 yards away. The crack of thunder which followed made me stop for a second in fear. I wanted to be at home reading a good book in a safe place. "Jesus!" Vern screamed in a high voice. "Look at that!" I looked up in the direction Vern was pointing and saw a blue-white fireball rolling fast up the left track, sounding exactly like an angry cat. It hurried past us as we turned in amazement to watch it go. 20 feet beyond us, it suddenly burst and disappeared. "What am I doing here?" Teddy said. "Man," Chris said happily, "it's going to rain like it's never rained before." But I agree with Teddy. The sky was alarming, lightning flashing down again, and this time there was no pause before the following thunder. My ears were still ringing from the thunder when Vern began to shout, There he is! I see him!" I can see Vern still if I want to. All I have to do is sit back for a minute, close my eyes. He's standing there on the left of the tracks, one hand protecting his eyes from the lightning that had just come down, the other stretching out and pointing. We ran up behind him and looked. I was thinking to myself, Vern's just imagining it, that's all, but he wasn't, although for a second I wish he was. In that moment I knew I never wanted to see a dead body, not even a tiny animal. At the bottom of the bank was a boggy, smelly mess of bushes, and peering out of the bushes was a single pale white hand. Did any of us breathe? I didn't. The wind was blowing quite strongly at times now. It was coming at us from no particular direction. I hardly noticed. Why couldn't we have seen the whole body instead of just that one hand, horribly white, the fingers resting upside down on the ground? The hand told us the truth of the whole matter. It made us know that death was real. The memory of that hand comes back to me every time I hear or read of some tragic disaster. Somewhere joined to that hand was the rest of Ray Brower. Lightning flashed, thunder cracked. After each flash of lightning, "Jesus!" Chris whispered. Vern's tongue was running over his lips as if he just tasted something new and different, something which excited him and disgusted him at the same time. Teddy only stood and looked. The wind blew his dirty hair first away from his ears and then back over them. His face was totally blank. They were black insects walking on the hand. A great whispering noise began to rise in the forest on both sides of the tracks, as if the forest had just noticed we were there and was commenting on it. The rain had started. Enormous drops of rain fell for 5 seconds and then stopped. There was a pause, and then the storm really started. Immediately we were all completely soaked. The whispering sound changed. Now it sounded like millions of hammers. It was as if the forest was blaming us for our discovery. Chris jumped over the side of the bank and I followed. Vern and Teddy were close behind us, but Chris and I were the first to reach the body of Ray Brower. He was face down. Chris looked into my eyes. I nodded slightly, as if he had spoken aloud. I think he was down here and fairly undamaged instead of up there between the tracks and completely knocked out of shape because he was trying to get out of the way when the train hit him. He had landed with his head towards the tracks, arms over his head, like someone about to dive. He had landed in a boggy ground, which was rapidly filling with water. His hair was dark red. There was blood in it, but not a lot. Not enough to make you feel sick. The insects were worse. He was wearing a dark green t-shirt, blue jeans. His feet were bare, and a few feet behind us, caught in a bush, I saw a pair of dirty shoes. For a moment I was puzzled. Why was he here and his shoes there? Then I realized, and the realization was like a heavy blow to the stomach. My wife, my children, my friends, they all think that having an imagination like mine must be quite nice. Not only do I make a lot of money from it, but I can also see films in my mind when I want to. But sometimes my imagination turns out to have long, sharp, cruel teeth. You see things you would prefer not to see, things that keep you awake all night. I saw one of those things, then I saw it clearly, and with absolute certainty. He was knocked clean out of his shoes. The train had knocked him out of his shoes just as it had knocked the life out of his body. That was what finally made me realize that the guy was dead. He wasn't ill, he wasn't sleeping, he wasn't going to get up in the morning anymore, or eat too many apples, or worry about school exams. He was dead. Completely dead. He wasn't going to go out with his friends in the spring to collect bottles uncovered by the departing snow. He wasn't going to get into fights in the playground. He wasn't going to pull a single girl's hair. He was everything like wasn't, can't, don't, should, wouldn't, couldn't. He was one big knot. He was dead. I could go on all day and not explain the distance between his bare feet and the ground and his dirty shoes hanging on the bush. It was about 3 feet. It was millions and millions of miles. He was disconnected from his shoes, and there was no hope of reconnection. He was dead. We turned him face up into the pouring rain, the lightning, the steady crack of thunder. There were insects all over his face and neck. They ran in and out of the ground collar on his t-shirt. His eyes were open but horribly wrong. One was rolled back so far that we could see only white. The other stared straight into the storm. There was some dried blood around his mouth and on his chin, and a wound on the right side of his face. Still, I thought, he didn't look too bad. I had once walked into a door that my brother Dennis was pushing open, and it had looked worse than this. An insect came out of his mouth, walked across his cheek, stepped on a leaf of a plant, and was gone. "Did you see that?" Teddy asked in a huge, strange voice. "I bet he's full of insects. I bet his brains are—" "Shut up, Teddy," Chris said. Lightning lit up this one good eye. You could almost believe he was glad to see us. Boys his own age. His body was swollen, and there was a slight smell of some gas. I turned away. I was sure I was going to get sick, but my stomach was dry and steady. I pushed 2 fingers down my throat, trying to make myself puke, wanting to, needed to, but nothing happened. The noise of the rain and the thunder had completely covered the sound of cars approaching along the back hollow road, which lay a few yards beyond this boggy area. It also covered the sound of them pushing through the trees and the bushes. The first we knew of them was Ace Merrill's voice calling above the noise of the storm, saying, "What have we got here?" And that was chapter 20, The Body. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.